Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In today's session, we have an interesting question coming from Mathematics Paper 1, 2023 Internal Examinations. The question is on functions. That's the topic that we're going to discuss. So here's the question. Given that g of x, the function g of x, function g, is equal to 3x plus 1, and h of x is equal to x minus 1 divided by 2. Find g inverse of x, g h of x, find x if g of x equals 22. Looks complicated? Let's first of all understand the basics before we could answer this question. So if you have a function f of x, so if we have a function f of x equal to x plus 3, so this is our function. If the question asks us to find f of 2, f of 2 simply means the value of x is 2 and you want to find the output. In other words, where there's x, you want to substitute with a 2. So f of 2 simply means this x is now 2. So we're going to say 2 because 2 is going where there's x. So 2 plus 3. So the answer is 5. Otherwise, if you want to find f of 3, would mean 3 plus 3, and the answer is 6. Apart from that, there's something called inverse of a function. So if you want to find the inverse of a function, you usually see this as f inverse of x. It means we want to find the inverse of the function f. G inverse of x, it means we want to find the inverse of the function g, and so on and so forth. So how do you find the inverse of a function? We're looking at linear functions. So this is a linear function that we have. So if I want to find the inverse of a function, so let's assume our function is f of x, which is equal to x plus 3, and we want to find the inverse of f. So the first thing that you're going to do, the first step, is to replace f of x by y. So where there's f of x, I will write y. So y equals x plus 3. That's the first step. The second step is to make x the subject of the formula. You want to make x be independent. In other words, x should be left alone there. So to make x the subject of the formula here, positive 3 can cross the equal sign. It becomes negative. So what I'm going to have is y minus 3 equals x. I can also look at it from the other way around. I can start with x. I can write this as x equals y minus 3. Once you reach that stage, you are almost done, because the last thing is simply to replace with what you have. So x, we're going to write what we're finding. We're finding the inverse of x, f here. So we're going to say f inverse of x now, there, equals, where there's y, you're going to put x back there. So I'm going to say x, then minus 3. So that's basically how you find the inverse of a function. So the first step is to replace f of x by y. After that, you need to make x the subject of the formula. This is what we are doing here. 3 goes there. After x is made the subject of the formula, all you need to do is, where there's x, you put the inverse function, f inverse of x, and where there's y, you take the x back there. Then you're done. So that's basically how we find the inverse of a function. Apart from that, there's another concept of composite functions. So composite functions, what you're doing is you're getting two functions, then you're combining them together. So I'm getting two functions, then putting them together, then I'm going to form something called a composite function. So for example, if you have f of x equal to 2x plus 1, this is now. Then we have another function called g of x equal to x plus 3. So for composite functions, you'll be seeing symbols like f of g of x, or sometimes this could be written as f of g, just like that. So this and that would mean one and the same thing. So when we talk about composite functions, we'll ask you to find fg of x, or I can also ask you to find g of f or gf of x. So I'm putting two functions together, then I'm forming a new function called a composite function. So what do we do? What we basically do is super easy. So if I ask you to find fg of x, remember in the first step we said f of 2, and whatever was inside here was replacing x in f. That's what we did. So where there was x, we had to put what is inside. So what was inside here was a 2. So this 2 had to take the place for x. It's the same thing that we're going to do here, except that what we have now is not a number. What we have is the entire function. So the entire function g of x is replacing x in f, just like what 2 was doing here. Remember 2, what was 2 doing here? 2 was getting to replace x in f. The same thing here. But what we have is not a 2 this time around. We have a new function. We have another function. So this function is replacing x in f. So what do we mean? What we basically mean here is f of, we already know what g of x is. G of x is x plus 3. So it's like you're finding f of x plus 3. Just like what 2 was doing there, this entire x plus 3 should go and replace x. So we're going to have, if we add a 2 here, where there's x here, we'll remove it and put 2 there. But what we have is not a 2, we have x plus 3. But we'll do the same. So we're going to say, so what we're going to do is, remember, f of x plus 3 now will be 2. Where there's x here, we're going to put x plus 3. So x plus 3. Then everything else remains the same. We have a 1 there, plus 1. What do? We expand. So 2 will multiply everything there. We're going to have 2 multiplied by x, 2x. 2 multiplied by positive 3, that's positive 6. Then remember, we have a 1 there, plus 1. Then overall, our answer becomes 2x plus 7. So that's basically how we compute these composite functions. So with this piece of information, let's try and understand how we can answer that question now. So we have this. The first question here says g inverse of x. So you want to find the inverse of the function g. So let's answer this together, step by step. So part A, we are finding the inverse of function g. First of all, we know that function g is 3x plus 1. The first step, where there's g of x, you put y there. So I'm going to say y is equal to 3x plus 1. That is step 1. Step 2, you're going to make x the subject of the formula. In other words, we want to remain with x alone there. Now the first step is, first of all, take positive 1 there, so it becomes negative 1. So we're going to have y minus 1 equal to 3x. What do we do for us to remain with x alone? We're going to divide throughout by 3. So we divide throughout by 3 like that. So this and that will cancel. I'm going to remain with x alone. So it means that x is equal to y minus 1 over 3. Remember, what do we do at this stage? Where there's x, we'll now say g inverse of x is found. So g inverse of, so therefore, g inverse of x equals, where there's y, please remember to replace y now by x. So where there's y, this one goes there now. So to be x minus 1 over 3. That's how you find the inverse of this function. B says g h of x. So g h of x. G h of x. Remember what we did? This simply means the entire function. Remember, this is the same as g of h of x. So it's like the entire function h of x is going to replace x in g. So we know that this is the same as g of, what is our h of x? H of x has been given to us as x minus 1 over 2. So it's like we're finding g of x minus 1 over 2. What do we do when we find something inside written like this? What is inside should go and replace x in this function g. So what's replacing x here is not a number, it's the entire function x minus 1 over 2. So we're going to have, remember our g of x is this, let me write this here, 3x plus 1, that is our g of x. Now what we want to do, we are finding g of x minus 1 over 2, meaning this entire thing should replace x. So where there's x here, we should remove x and put x minus 1 over 2. That's the meaning there. So we're going to have 3, where there's x there, x minus 1 over 2. That's what we've done. Remember, we've removed this x and put that. So this is representing x. But what do we have here? We have plus 1. Don't forget that. So what does this mean? This simply means it's multiplying throughout by 3. So we're going to multiply everything on top there by 3. So we're going to have, so to open this, 3 multiplied by x, 3x. 3 multiplied by negative 1, negative 3. But remember, everything is being divided by 2. Then plus 1 there, like that. All we need to do now here is to combine these two and simplify. So this is the same as over 1. The lowest common denominator here is simply 2. So 2 into 2 is 1. 1 multiplied by this, you still get the same thing. So 3x minus 3. Then 1 into 2 is 2. 2 multiplied by 1 is 2. So simplifying this, we're going to have 3x. These are like terms. Negative 3 plus 2 will give you negative 1. And everything divided by 2. So we can conclude here and say, therefore, g h of x equals that, 3x minus 1 over 2. The last part says, find x, meaning you want to find the value of x if g of x is 22. So the key feature here is g of x is 22. So the first thing that you're going to ask yourself is, do you have g of x? Apparently, we do not have g of x, but we know how to find g of x. So g of x, I'll use this part here. So we want to find g of x. They've told us to say it's equal to 22. So the first thing that we're going to do is try and find g of x. So let's first of all find g of x. So g of x simply means g of x like that. In other words, it's like the same function is replacing itself in x. So this thing should now go where there's x in itself. That's what it means. That's like what we are doing. It's another composite function, only that it's the same function replacing itself. So that's what you should understand. It's the same thing, nothing has changed here. So we're going to use this and say this is the same as g of, we already know that g of f of x is 3x plus 1. So it's like we have g of 3x plus 1. But what do we do with this? Remember, this thing should go where there is x in this function g. So in other words, where there's x, remember our g of x is this one. So where there's x here, we should put what is inside there. Now what is inside is 3x plus 1. So where there's x, remember we have a 3 there. Now where there's x here, we remove that and put 3x plus 1. So 3x plus 1. But everything else would remain the same there and say plus 1. So it means that our g of x, we now find in this is equal to, we can expand this multiplied by that, 9x, this 3, then we have plus 1. Now what they've told us is this g of x is actually equal to 22, meaning this thing is already equal to 22. You can see the similarity here. So where there's g of x, I can actually put 22. So I could have 22 here because g of x is 22. Is equal to 9x plus 3 plus 1 is 4. So all we need to do here is collect the like terms and find the value of x. So you can see that 4 can cross the equal sign, goes there. We're going to have 22 minus 4 equal to 9x. So 22 minus 4 is 18. So we're going to have 18 equal to 9x. So to find the value of x, all we need to do here is divide throughout by 9. There, 9, like that. And therefore, our x value is equal to, how many 9s are in 18? We have a 2 there. So this is the answer to this question. And that's how we answer this question from 2023 internal examinations. Bye-bye.